So, we're now a couple weeks removed from the finale of the first season in Disney's new series Percy Jackson and the Olympians. I was going to put out a video a little sooner, but on top of just being busy with general life stuff, I wanted a little bit to let the show sit with me, share my thoughts on the series, things I liked, things I didn't like, and all the things under that umbrella. So with that said, let's get into it. Now, I've been a fan of Percy Jackson since I read the books as a kid into my teen years. I do forget a decent amount of the details in the later books, but I do remember quite a bit of the first book, The Lightning Thief, which is what the first season has been adapted from. I think it's pretty clear to most, even those who weren't a fan of the show, that right from the start it was better than that awful 2010 adaptation starring Logan Lerman. In defense of the movie, trying to condense this book into one movie as opposed to a multiple episode season of television isn't exactly fair, but just from the casting alone it already wins. I mean, they actually casted kids to play kids, unlike Logan Lerman and Alexandra Daddario, which looked like they were in their mid-20s when the first film came out. Now, there are a lot of things that I think they did really well. For starters, the visual effects looked pretty decent for a TV series. They don't come close to something like House of the Dragon, but still for what they were going for, they looked pretty damn good. None of the CGI ever took me out of the scenes, whether it's the rendered monsters that appear throughout the season or the landscapes like when they reached Hell, it all worked in my opinion. I also really like Walker Scobell as the main character Percy Jackson. He brings a vulnerability to the character that's much needed, and his natural charisma really works for the character. Even with some of the clunkier bits of dialogue, he manages to still deliver them in a really charming and likable way. I enjoyed being able to develop the friendship with the three main characters, Percy, Annabeth, and Grover. In the film, they're sort of just immediately friends, whereas the multiple episodes allow them to develop a genuine care for each other over time. It makes the whole thing feel a lot more natural. The casting in general is pretty good. Some casting choices take me out of it a little bit, like seeing former WWE wrestler Edge playing Ares the God of War, or Jason Mantzoukas as one of the other gods. It was all a little bit jarring, but for the most part, whether it's the child actors or the adults, a lot of the casting seemed fitting for what they were going for. I thought a lot of the music composed for the show was pretty damn good and used sparingly enough to where it never felt overbearing or used as a crutch. I think the big moments usually work with or without the music, which is always a good thing. There is a lot to enjoy about the show. It has a lot of heart and earnest to it that is shocking from modern day Disney. It often reminded me of that childhood sense of wonder I remember getting watching the first two Harry Potter films as a kid, where there are a few darker elements of the story and world, but there's enough comedic relief and lightheartedness that's really enjoyable to watch. I can totally see being a young kid and absolutely loving this show. Now for the stuff I don't like. The story beats and writing as a whole I thought was pretty decent, however there is a lot of dialogue that I would consider to be clunky and unnatural, and nowhere is that more clear than with the character of Annabeth. Now this is no diss on the actress who plays her. I do think some of her line delivery felt a little stilted and unnatural, and you often run into that with child actors. However, as the season progresses, you do see her improve as an actress, and it'll be really cool to see where she's at in 2 to 3 seasons when they delve into the later books. I will say in her defense that the writing does her a massive disservice, as a lot of the time, since not only are we the audience being introduced to this world, so is Percy. It feels as if the writers just use Annabeth as a way to exposition dump. In general, there is a bit of an issue with exposition in this show as a whole. It often comes across as very unnatural whenever they're explaining certain aspects of how this magical world functions, and unfortunately a lot of the time they place that bad exposition dialogue on Annabeth, who explains it to Percy. It's similar in the way if you've ever seen a sci-fi show or movie with a kid where they have to explain a bunch of science jargon, it never really feels authentic. And although Annabeth as a character would know a lot about the world since she's lived in it longer than Percy, it really does feel by the end of the show that a majority of her dialogue is just explaining things. Her best moments as a character and as an actress are when it's the more emotional beats in the story, like when Percy sacrifices himself so they can retrieve Ares' shield, and other moments similar to that. It's clear there is talent there, but it gets bogged down by a vast amount of scenes telling Percy about the history of a certain god or the reason why XYZ is happening. Another issue I have with the show, and one that's covered in an excellent video by Captain Midnight, is the show's reservation in showcasing action. Maybe it was the budget, maybe they felt it unnecessary, but there is a surprising lack of action scenes in a show about mythical demigods fighting monsters. I hope in the following seasons, as the actors get older and the budget increases, that we get some really well done action set pieces, as the first season definitely feels like a very dialogue heavy show, and as mentioned, the dialogue is not always the best. My last major issue with this show is the pacing. I have no issue with certain episodes being longer than others, but similar to one of my criticisms with the first season of HBO's The Last of Us, I think Percy Jackson would have benefited with an additional episode or two. It would have made the overall journey and the end results of their quest feel more satisfying, and would have given additional time to build that relationship between the three leads. As a whole, I don't think this is a bad show. It's not amazing and it won't knock your socks off. I promise your socks will remain on, but it does have a likable lead character, some really solid secondary characters, and an overall great sense of wonder and adventure. It's easy for me, a 26-year-old man, to criticize a show focused on a younger demographic based off books also made for younger kids. And as mentioned earlier, I think this show can operate in the same way for kids as Harry Potter did for my generation growing up. There are a lot of really good pieces in this show, and although season 1 didn't exactly assemble them in the most efficient fashion, the seeds of a great show are there under the surface, and I'm really excited for whenever season 2 drops. I think they have a lot of really good stuff already in place, but there is plenty of room for improvement. Well, that is it for today, guys. What did you think of season 1 of Percy Jackson and the Olympians? Did you like it, love it, hate it? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And as always, if you liked this video, please smash the like button, subscribe to me if you want to hear more from me, and click the little bell notification button so you get notified when I post new content. Make sure to follow my horror movie podcast, Scared Speechless, anywhere you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and we're also on YouTube. Link in the description. And of course, I will see you guys on the next video.